free will, and then risk. When they're in order, it's okay. But when they're out of kilter, that's where the danger can happen. Hello, and welcome to the Mosai Network. And I am Steve Distante, and I am a Mosai member. I am an entrepreneur first and foremost. I am an investment banker. Believe it or not, I studied accounting, which makes me very boring, but I do understand numbers pretty darn well. And I live in New York on Long Island. That's where my headquarters for my businesses are, as well as in Georgia. I have a 400-acre farm in Georgia where we grow trees and we have fantastic animals and we have entrepreneurial retreats. I've been an entrepreneur all my life, started at 6 years old. And as my story in my book usually tells, my first business was gathering horse manure on the horse trails behind my house. And I would sell the horse manure to my neighbors and they'd pay me. And it was my way of being able to communicate with people, the entrepreneurial way. And they'd give me $1 and they'd smile and they had a sparkle in their eye. And I've been selling shit ever since. So welcome to my session. I could teach on a lot of things. I'm an author. I've written 2 books. First book is, and that's what we're going to focus on today, is Pitchology, the art and science of raising capital for entrepreneurs. I've also written another book, which is called Once Upon a Time in Entrepreneurland. It's kind of right over here, if I can get my hand right. There you go, right there, boom, boom. If you notice, we've got Kira's book over here. There's Kira's book. There's Doug Brockman's book, Driven. Joe Polish's book. And here's my other book, Pitchology. And you'll get to see the cover in just a few minutes. So I've been asked many times, who do I want to be a hero to? And the truth of the matter is, I want to be a hero to entrepreneurs. I want to help them scale and grow. I want to help entrepreneurs to be able to demystify one of the things that most people or many people are frightened of, and that is money. And so I wrote a book all about it. It took me 2 years, 2 really tough years of doing it because I identify as a perfectionist, which means it ain't over ever because nothing's perfect, right? But I've learned to get over that and to share my gifts and talents with the world by writing the book, publishing the book, speaking about the book, and consulting with clients in order to help them demystify this thing we call money. Whether it's raising capital or extracting cash out of your business or turning an expense into an asset, that's what I do. So I'm going to put the camera actually on my book so you can see it. And so if you look at the book, I think about this stuff all the time. It's got a little bit of the edge worn off. It's got a little bit of camo on it. It's supposed to be your handbook for capital. That's what it's for. It's for you to learn all about what it is that you need to do to raise capital and again, to create for yourself some wealth. So let's look inside the book. Is my hardcover version. So it's a little different than some. But in the book itself, it focuses on a whole bunch of different chapters and different methodologies. Let's see if we can look at some of this. There we go. We can see that. Wow. Cool. So let's look at some of these. And there's some really great people in here. So to be an investable entrepreneur, featuring Michael Gerber. You may have heard of him. He is the granddaddy of the E-myth, the entrepreneurial myth, the myth that all entrepreneurs who start a business are entrepreneurs. Usually they're suffering technicians and they create a job for themselves and they become a slave to their business and they have a madman as a boss. I know Michael pretty well. Keep going, What to Expect, featuring Max Flightman. Max does a whole bunch on pitch decks and so on. Why Purpose Matters with Trip Baird. He's another impact investment guy. This one's cool. How to Tell Your Story, featuring Jack Lane. We go through deal structure, systems and processes, angels, friends, and family, featuring David Rose. So how do you find the right investor? Well, we usually start with friends and family. That's usually where we start. I mean, most of us do, at least. Venture capitalists, what that means. Equity crowdfunding. You do it online. Family offices. What the heck is a family office, and should I get involved with them? There's a couple others. Traditional banking with purpose. Ken LaRoe. They actually financed my farm because I had purpose, and you have to find people who can pretty much align with your values. Mergers and acquisitions with Andrew Sherman. He's an attorney. He's brilliant. I really enjoyed working with Andrew. Andrew is an IP expert as well. SPACs featuring Peter Diamandis. And Peter, if you don't know him, he's got the Abundance 360 crowd, Singularity University, the X Prize, all that good stuff. Collaborations featuring Dan Sullivan. So he's the guru behind Strategic Coach. He's about to turn 80. Unbelievable. I look at him and say, wow, look at this. This is how I want to live my life. ESOPs featuring Richard Harmon. My goodness. ESOPs are about the most amazing thing I've ever seen, where you can actually give your business, donate your business, transfer shares of your business, maybe not all of them, to your employees. You can still hold majority shareholdership, take capital out. We'll talk about that in a little while. Books featuring Tucker Max. Tucker Max is not in this business anymore, but he used to talk about books. And then Lights, Camera, Action. Maximum Impact with Akira Chan, who's the director for some of my films. And finally, a conversation with a woman named Sandra Powers, who talks to you about positioning your company and making it more valuable. So I wanted to show you one more thing in this book, which I think is kind of cool. And that is that every single one of these chapters has in it some sort of interview. It's either going to be a podcast or YouTube or both. And so when you go to the chapters, you'll see that each one has a QR code. So this one, you would go in and you would see Michael Gerber's the QR code for his podcast and for his YouTube. And so I find that to be really important for entrepreneurs, because the fact is that we learn in different ways, right? So being able to add to the content, and this isn't verbatim what's in the chapter. This is a conversation about what it is that we're talking about. So being an investable entrepreneur, Michael Gerber, we talk quite a bit about what kind of entrepreneur do people want to invest in. The reality is they want somebody who's vulnerable, somebody who's driven. So here's our book Driven over here on that side. The other side, I can't seem to get my finger backwards. I don't do this very well. Bing, bing, bing. And that's Doug Brackman's book. So the book Driven is all about, I love to bring other people's books into the focus, is all about personality types. And are you a driven? Are you the kind of person that has this energy that just can't be stopped? Maybe like Kira. I mean, have you ever been around Kira when she was not energetic? And that woman does not drink coffee or do anything else in order to enhance that energy. She's just a bottle of energy. And that's just the reality of things. And that's us as entrepreneurs. I recently had an opportunity to spend a little time with Lance Armstrong and Danica Patrick in the Genius Network, part of their 100K club. And in the Genius Network, when we were talking with these, and we had an intimate group, and we were talking with these super athletes, what we found out was they peaked early, and then they spent their life, as it appeared, chasing after their dreams. Well, you as an entrepreneur don't have to worry about that because your dreams are ahead of you down the road and you can do it. But sometimes you need capital. And that's why I created Pitchology. So how do we do this? How do we raise money? Well, first and foremost, we need to have a business. Usually it has to have some assets in it and some sales, right? So you have to have a product. And once you have a going concern, as we call it, that going concern could potentially raise capital. And you can do it in a couple of ways. You can do debt, which is a note, a bond, something like that, a loan. You could get rid of equity, which is ownership. So you probably own 100% of your company now. And what would somebody pay you for 10% of your company or 20% of your company? And usually, I think the story goes, the buyer thinks it's copper, the seller thinks it's gold. And if there's a business broker or investment banker involved, they know it's really silver. So everybody wants something for nothing and everybody wants to sell something at the top number. There's also a note that you could do, which typically gives nothing except for a discount in the future. And those notes are typically not given as a primary means of raising capital. It's kind of like an early stage sort of thing. So I'm not a huge fan of those as well. But raising capital, when I'm interviewing somebody who's looking to raise capital for their company, I ask them, how much of your own money have you put in? How much of the family and friends round did you raise? And where are you at now? And how much do you want? And what are you going to use that money for? Because a lot of times you'll find that people want OPM, other people's money, right? Remember that? Or other people's money. And they take it and then do what they want with it. And then don't want to pay it back. Well, that's not so great. So what we do is we create winning circumstances. I call them victory conditions for you to raise your capital. And that could be in a multitude of ways. So we could get an investor. Private equity comes in all the time to try to buy companies pennies on the dollar. So what is private equity? Well, they use OPM. They have investors' money and they try to inject it into companies like yours and then essentially take money out of your company in order to pay back the investors and then make money from the residual. And they'll either set up toll booths, meaning lots of extra revenue from other things that you never thought about, sell off certain assets. That's where they gut a company. Or sometimes they have an opportunity to be able to multiply the investment by applying what you do to another company, perhaps, or another industry that they have a relationship with and create all sorts of value for themselves, not for you, unless you're still an owner in the company. A lot of times those come with investment contracts or employment contracts where part of the return of the money is based upon you working for 3 years. And let's just face it, if you're an entrepreneur and you're watching this right now, you're probably unemployable. That's right. We just don't like to work for other people. We like to create our own path. We don't like to be accountable to others. We want to simply be able to exist and do our craft. And that might be creating. It might be us taking our energy and putting it in good places and bad places. And as an investor in a company, I think we're due a bit of transparency when we ask, what are you going to use the money for? And how can we help? Because as entrepreneurs, we are very valuable to the ecosystem. We can help an entrepreneur skip to the front of the line, be able to get access, credibility to your Rolodex, so to speak, that normally a person wouldn't have. So let's say you had me invest in your company. Well, there's many people who would say, wow, Steve invested in it. He's a professional in the investment world. Must be a good deal. Maybe I'll put some money into that. And that's what you're looking to do, is to leverage some of the relationships that that person has that you intend to work with and have them hopefully mentor you throughout this process. So I go through a whole bunch of different ways of raising capital. And as I mentioned, in the ESOP world, which is an employee stock ownership plan, I think that's a great way of being able to give your employees equity in your company. Let me talk a little bit about the mechanics of how that works. So you get a valuation, and a company usually needs to be pretty darn profitable. So we're talking $2 to $3 million a year. It's a lot of money, but not so much. When money starts to pour in, it does. And that's when you know it's time to consider an ESOP. You can ESOP not your whole company. You can ESOP 49%, stay in control, and continue to grow the company. Still be an owner in the growth of that company. Take that 49%, let's say it's worth $10 million, put it into a trust. And what ends up happening in that trust is that there are banks that are willing to lend against that asset, the ownership in that company. They'll lend typically like 65 to 70%. So $6.5 million to $7 million goes to the owner, who could basically take that money and do certain things with it to make it tax-free, or capital gains. Depends how they do it, the structure and such. And that excess amount, the 35%, can get paid as a note to the entrepreneur. Well, God, I love that. So in my book, Pitchology, The Art and Science of Raising Capital, we tell a story about a woman. True story, actually. But so what? I'm not going to tell you who it is. She sold her company for $900 million. Wow. And she gave each of her employees 2 first-class plane tickets and bunch of money, $10,000 each. And the reality is that she was bought out by private equity. And had she done an ESOP, because this was a wildly profitable company, had she done an ESOP and then done the private equity, let's say a few years down the road, all of her employees likely would have been millionaires. Yeah, millionaires. And there would be $1 million plus in their retirement account, because this is what we call qualified money. And the owner of the company, the entrepreneur, also would have another payday. That's pretty great, right? And so sometimes it's positioning. Sometimes it's taking your company and changing the way you do things in an ESOP, where you can walk away if you want or stay in the game. And I like that part, staying in the game, because that's where we get our juice, right? So I talk about this particular theory in my second book, Once Upon a Time in Entrepreneurland. And I have a copy in front of me that's a little clearer to see. And you can find both of these books, Once Upon a Time in Entrepreneurland and Pitchology, in every place you buy books. And you can hear it on Audible, and you'll hear my beautiful voice, just because I was told by Joe Polish, you have to record it yourself. And was that painful? But it's relevant, because we know what we're talking about, and we're excited about what it is that we do. And so we get to put the inflection there, the excitement. And when you record a book on your own, at one of these studios, that is, for me, they had this AI that would read the words that were in the book and then the words that I said. And they'd do pickups. They'd say, you didn't say the right, or whatever. You know how you change words when you're reading something, especially your own words. And it did that, and that was painful. So it was 3.5 days of pain for the first book, 2.5 days of pain for the second book. So anyway, the entrepreneurial triangle, it's a concept I've developed, which I actually filed for a patent on, because it's a concept that's worth saving. Before I tell you what it is, let me talk to you about IP. IP is hot. IP is valuable. I have a friend who had a company that was being bought for $500 million. That's with a B. And he was told to get his IP in order by an advisor. And he ended up selling the company within less than a year for $1 billion, twice the number. If you know anything about the way companies are valued, it's usually EBITDA, which is earnings before income tax, amortization, depreciation, interest, and amortization, so EBITDA. And IP has become so valuable that I've actually advised many of my clients to take their money and put it into IP and put it in a separate entity because it could be more valuable than your company itself. But back to my entrepreneurial uh, triangle. And these are the sides of our personality. Tell me if this works for you, because I have yet to find an entrepreneur that doesn't identify with this triangle. So here we go, triangle, so to speak. That's an equilateral triangle. All sides are equal. On the bottom is drive, as our buddy Doug Brackman talks about, Dr. Doug. Drive is that energy that we have. It's 10% of the population. It's athletes, it's Navy SEALs, it's us. And we can't stop with our energy. We need to keep going. We need to expend it. So there's drive on one side, free will on the other side. That free will on the other side is where we just don't like rules, and we like to make rules and make stuff up and make it happen, make it real. So we've got drive, we've got free will, and last but not least is risk. We love risk. We enjoy risk. And as my friend, never actually met him, Steve Jobs used to say, bet big, but don't bet the farm. Or in my book, Once Upon a Time in Entrepreneurland, it says, bet big, but don't bet the kingdom, Lord Farquaad. Yeah, my fact checker was asking me, where did he say that in the movie? I said, come on, give me a break. I made it up. Anyway, so those are the three sides of the entrepreneurial pyramid or triangle. And so on the bottom, drive, free will, and then risk. When they're in order, it's okay. But when they're out of kilter, that's where the danger can happen. And that's why so many entrepreneurs are subject to depression, addiction, getting themselves in trouble because we get bored with our companies. If things aren't happening fast and hard, we are bored. And I've often spoken to many of my entrepreneurial friends who say they're busy putting out fires. And my question for them when they say that is, okay, I hear you. I've heard that 1,000 times. My question for you is, are you a paid firefighter? Are you a volunteer firefighter? Or are you an arsonist? And when you're looking at your business, a lot of times we just screw with things in order to make us feel a little bit better. So my goal in life and in the entrepreneurial ecosystem is to help entrepreneurs raise capital, to help them scale, grow, and get paid for the businesses that we've created. I've also taken a position of chairman and founder of my companies. And the reason I've done that is because I am not such a great manager. I have people who do that. And it's been a blessing for me to be able to focus on things like writing books, like having a tree and retreat farm down in Georgia. It's called Cali Farms if you want to check it out. And most recently, what I've done is I've put together a platform. It's called the Private Investor Network. And we'll give you the address for that to take a look, because we're going to be doing a course on Pitchology, all of those different ways of raising capital, how to prepare to raise capital, how to turn expenses into assets. There will be a course for you to consider to learn more about this very important subject. So the privateinvestor.network, .network like .com, but it's .network, of course. And in there, you'll be part of a community of entrepreneur investors, and you'll be able to see how other entrepreneurs are doing it, how they're raising capital, how they're investing in other entrepreneurs. And I do believe that you'll probably enjoy the heck out of that. So, my name is Steve Distante. I hope you've learned a little something here today. One of my favorite things to do is to work with entrepreneurs and to work with entrepreneurial students as well. So if you know anybody that would want to have their university use Once Upon a Time in Entrepreneurland as a book for a course, I would love to hear more about that. So a little bit about this book, and I'm going to do a segment on that. So Once Upon a Time in Entrepreneurland is a series of 14 entrepreneurial fables. That's right, fables. Because there's something that happens very special with your brain when I tell you I'm going to tell you a story. Your bullshit meter turns off. Suddenly you relax and you're not such a critic anymore. Is he telling the truth? That's a little far-fetched. So in my version of the Three Little Pigs that are in here, I've got 3 stories actually about the 3 little pigs, although they're very personal to me. BB Wolf, Big Bad Wolf, ends up going into business with the 3 little pigs because he's the driven Big Bad Wolf. Big Bad Wolf wasn't knocking on the door of all of those little huts to break in. He was huffing and puffing to talk to them about a deal he just heard about. And he had the guts to do it, but the pigs had the money. They had the bacon. So he made that happen. And the stories that are in here will relate to us as adult entrepreneurs, but also to student entrepreneurs and even your kids. You may want to read the story first to make sure you don't use any naughty words with the little kids, but most of them are pretty good. One of my favorite stories is the beginning also. It's called The Story of Stone Soup, and it comes from an interview. And again, I've got podcasts attached to this book as well with Joe Polish. Joe Polish from the Genius Network, who I mentioned before. So Joe and I spoke, and he said, I feel like most entrepreneurs I'm dealing with are like those carpetbaggers in Stone Soup. They got nothing, and they want you to just put all your money into their companies to give them something. And I said, yeah, I get it. But as they say, being an entrepreneur is not about having the resources, but being resourceful. And that's what we all are. We're looking to leverage. We're looking to grow. And sometimes it needs OPM, other people's money. So my name is Steve Distante. I am a pitchologist from the book Pitchology and from the book Once Upon a Time in Entrepreneurland. And I hope you enjoyed this segment. Thank you for inviting me.